Donald Trump, a man whose larger-than-life persona had long dominated headlines, was no stranger to the spotlight. His well-documented love for fast food, particularly his penchant for KFC, had become a quirky footnote in his public image, fodder for memes and late-night comedians alike. So when Jimmy Kimmel Live announced President Trump as the guest for a special episode, the anticipation was palpable. Would Kimmel, with his razor-sharp wit and penchant for poking at powerful figures, take the bait? Could Trump, known for his quick temper and unfiltered retorts, handle the host's inevitable jabs? The studio buzzed with nervous energy, the audience primed for a spectacle. As the show opened, Kimmel strode onto the stage, his grin wide but carrying a sly edge. "Tonight we've got the president himself, Donald Trump," he said, pausing, as the crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and murmurs. "And let's just say, we're serving up something hotter than a KFC bucket." The laughter was immediate, but beneath it lay a current of tension. Why had Trump agreed to this appearance, knowing Kimmel's history of biting commentary? Was he here to charm, to deflect, or to confront? The stage was set, the lights blazed, and Kimmel wasted no time, weaving sly references to Trump's fast food obsession into his monologue. He held up a KFC bucket as a prop, winking at the camera. "This is presidential dining, folks," he quipped, drawing roars from the crowd. The hook was set, but no one could predict how quickly the mood would shift. What would happen when Trump took the stage? Could Kimmel's jokes land without sparking a fire? The audience leaned in, sensing a clash that would be anything but ordinary. Stick around to see how this on-air showdown spirals into chaos, and don't forget to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. The audience's laughter from Jimmy Kimmel's opening jab about the KFC bucket still echoed as Donald Trump made his entrance. Striding onto the stage with his signature swagger, he wore a tailored navy suit, his expression a blend of confidence and guarded alertness. The crowd erupted, a cacophony of cheers and scattered boos, their energy feeding the charged atmosphere. Kimmel, standing to greet him, extended a hand, his smile warm but laced with mischief. Trump shook it firmly, his eyes scanning the host before settling on the audience with a nod. As they settled into their seats, Kimmel wasted no time diving into the interview, starting with a nod to Trump's recent public appearances. "You've been busy, Mr. President," Kimmel said, his tone light but probing. "But I got to ask, how do you find time for all those KFC runs?" The audience roared, and Kimmel leaned back, holding up a mock fast food menu for effect. Trump's smile tightened, his fingers tapping briefly on the armrest. He responded with a chuckle, deflecting with a comment about enjoying American food, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of irritation. Kimmel pressed on, weaving in another jab about Trump's love for fried chicken, suggesting it was practically a White House staple. The crowd laughed again, but Trump's demeanor grew stiffer, his responses shorter, laced with a forced jocularity. "I eat what I like, Jimmy," he said, his voice carrying a subtle edge. The camera caught a close-up of his face, the smile not quite reaching his eyes. The crew in the control booth exchanged glances, sensing the undercurrent of tension beneath the banter. Had Kimmel's relentless focus on fast food struck a nerve? Was Trump's patience already thinning, or was he biding his time? The stage was a powder keg, and the audience could feel the first sparks. The studio's energy shifted subtly as Jimmy Kimmel, emboldened by the audience's laughter, leaned deeper into his fast food jabs. Sensing he'd found a groove, he pivoted from Trump's KFC, his tone dripping with mock concern. "Seriously, Mr. President," Kimmel said, holding up a photo of Trump with a KFC bucket, "all that fried chicken can't be good for the heart, right? I'm worried about you." The audience howled, some clapping wildly as Kimmel feigned a frown, shaking his head like a concerned friend. The screen behind him flashed an exaggerated cartoon of a chicken drumstick wearing a presidential sash, drawing another wave of laughter. Trump's face hardened, his smile now a thin line, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He leaned forward slightly, his voice measured but carrying a sharper bite. "I'm in great shape, Jimmy. Better than most guys my age. You should try it sometime." The retort drew a mix of cheers and gasps from the crowd, but the humor felt forced, a deflection rather than a deflection. Kimmel, undeterred, chuckled and pressed on, pulling out a prop, a comically oversized KFC bucket, and pretending to offer it to Trump. "This is your legacy, right here," he said, winking at the camera. The audience roared, but Trump's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing as he watched Kimmel play to the crowd. The laughter began to feel one-sided, the room's warmth tilting toward the host. The crew in the control booth tensed, the monitors showing close-ups of Trump's tightening jaw, his fingers now still, as if holding back a storm. Had Kimmel's relentless mockery gone too far? Was Trump's patience fraying, or was he calculating his next move? The banter was no longer playful. It was a gauntlet, and the audience could sense the shift, their laughter tinged with unease as the confrontation loomed closer. The studio's atmosphere grew taut as Jimmy Kimmel's relentless jabs about Trump's fast food habits pushed the interview into perilous territory. The oversized KFC bucket prop, still perched on Kimmel's desk, seemed to loom larger, a symbol of the host's unyielding focus on the gag. Kimmel, riding the wave of the audience's laughter, leaned in with a glint of mischief. "Come on, Mr. President," he said, his voice laced with exaggerated sincerity. "You're the leader of the free world, and you're eating like a college kid on a bender. What's the deal?" The crowd erupted, some hooting as Kimmel held up a mock fast food receipt, pretending to read off an order of extra crispy wings and a side of chaos. Trump's face was a mask of barely contained fury, his eyes burning with an intensity that silenced the room's fringes. He shifted in his seat, his posture rigid, as if bracing against a tide. "You know, Jimmy," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "I eat what the American people eat. Maybe you're out of touch." The retort landed with a thud, drawing a few cheers but mostly stunned murmurs from the audience. Kimmel's smile flickered, his usual quick wit faltering as he tried to laugh it off. "Out of touch? Me? I'm just looking out for you," he said, but the deflection felt weak, the crowd's response tepid. The camera zoomed in on Trump's unyielding stare, his lips pressed into a thin line while Kimmel fidgeted with the prop bucket, his confidence visibly shaken. The crew in the control booth held their breath, the monitors flashing between Trump's steely resolve and Kimmel's strained grin. Had Kimmel's mockery crossed a line into personal insult? Was Trump ready to let it slide, or was he gearing up for a counterstrike? The tension was palpable, a coiled spring ready to snap, as the audience waited for the next move in this high-stakes showdown. The studio's energy crackled with unease as Donald Trump's pointed jab, accusing Jimmy Kimmel of being out of touch, hung in the air like a challenge. The audience, caught between nervous laughter and anticipation, shifted in their seats, their eyes locked on the two men. Kimmel, visibly rattled but clinging to his role as host, forced a chuckle, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. He tried to pivot, steering the conversation toward Trump's recent policy moves, but the shift felt forced, the fast food jabs still lingering like a bad aftertaste. "Let's talk about something serious," Kimmel said, his tone strained. "But I bet you'd rather talk about your next KFC order, right?" The weak attempt at humor drew scattered laughs, but Trump's expression darkened, his hands clenching briefly before resting still. He leaned forward, his voice steady but laced with venom. "You think you're funny, Jimmy, but you're just making a fool of yourself," he said, each word deliberate, slicing through the studio's manufactured cheer. The crowd gasped, a ripple of shock spreading through the rows. Kimmel's face flushed, his smile crumbling as he scrambled for a response. "Hey, it's just a joke, Mr. President," he said, but the words sounded hollow, his usual charm drowned by Trump's unyielding stare. The camera captured the moment in stark detail, zooming in on Trump's piercing gaze and Kimmel's faltering composure. The crew in the control booth exchanged frantic glances, the monitors showing a close-up of Kimmel's sweat-beaded brow. The interview was no longer a playful sparring match, it was a battlefield, and Kimmel was losing ground. Had Trump's retort exposed a crack in the host's armor? Was Kimmel's relentless teasing about to backfire spectacularly? The audience leaned in, sensing the confrontation barreling toward a breaking point, every second charged with the promise of escalation. The studio was a tinderbox. Donald Trump's stinging rebuke, "You're just making a fool of yourself," still reverberating as Jimmy Kimmel struggled to regain his footing. The audience, now fully gripped by the unfolding drama, sat in rapt silence, their earlier laughter replaced by a tense anticipation. Kimmel's face betrayed a flicker of panic, his hands fumbling with a pen as he tried to salvage the segment. All right," he said, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a cough. "Let's move on, Mr. President. No more chicken talk, I promise." But the attempt to defuse the situation only seemed to embolden Trump, whose eyes glinted with a mix of disdain and opportunity. He leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed but predatory, as if sensing Kimmel's vulnerability. The host, desperate to shift gears, asked a softball question about Trump's favorite moments in office. But Trump barely engaged, offering a curt response before turning the tables. "You know, Jimmy," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you sit here mocking me, but you've never done anything half as tough as running a country." The audience gasped, a few cheers breaking through the stunned murmurs. Kimmel's jaw tightened, his attempt at a smile looking more like a grimace. He tried to pivot with a weak quip about the stresses of late-night hosting, but Trump cut him off, his voice rising. "Keep laughing, but the American people see through this nonsense," he said, gesturing to the crowd, who erupted in a mix of applause and uneasy whispers. The camera zoomed in on Kimmel's flushed face, his eyes darting to the audience for support that wasn't coming. The crew in the control booth held their breath, the monitors flashing between Trump's commanding presence and Kimmel's unraveling composure. Had Kimmel's jabs awakened a force he couldn't contain? Was Trump about to dismantle the host's carefully crafted persona? The confrontation was reaching a fever pitch, and the audience was riveted, waiting for the inevitable explosion. The studio pulsed with raw energy as Donald Trump's scathing words, "The American people see through this nonsense," landed like a verbal sledgehammer, leaving Jimmy Kimmel visibly shaken. The audience, now a divided sea of cheers and stunned silence, leaned forward, their anticipation electric. Kimmel's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of his desk, his usual quick wit buried under the weight of Trump's relentless assault. He tried to muster a response, his voice cracking as he said, "I'm just doing my job, Mr. President. It's comedy." But the defense was feeble, drowned out by Trump's commanding presence. The president leaned forward, his eyes locked on Kimmel with an intensity that seemed to shrink the host in his chair. "Comedy? You call this comedy?" Trump said, his voice booming with disdain. "You're not funny, Jimmy. You're desperate, and it's pathetic." The audience gasped, a collective jolt of shock rippling through the room. Some clapped, others whispered, the divide in their reactions mirroring the broader cultural fault lines Trump so often exploited. Kimmel's face flushed a deep red, his eyes wide with a mix of humiliation and disbelief. He opened his mouth to retort, but no words came, his silence a stark contrast to Trump's unyielding barrage. The camera captured every excruciating detail, zooming in on Kimmel's sweat-beaded forehead and Trump's triumphant smirk. The crew in the control booth stood frozen, the monitors flashing chaotic close-ups of the host's unraveling and the guest's dominance. The segment had spiraled far beyond a late-night roast. It was a public dismantling with Kimmel's credibility on the line. Had Trump planned to turn the tables all along, or had Kimmel's mockery pushed him to this breaking point? Was there Any way for the host to claw back control, or was he doomed to be overshadowed? The confrontation was at its peak, a clash of egos that held the audience captive, each second crackling with the promise of a decisive blow. The studio was a crucible of raw emotion. Donald Trump's brutal takedown. "You're not funny, Jimmy. You're desperate, and it's pathetic," ringing in the air like a final verdict. Jimmy Kimmel sat shell-shocked behind his desk, his face a mask of humiliation, his hands motionless as the audience's mixed reactions swirled around him. Cheers from Trump's supporters clashed with murmurs of discomfort from others, creating a cacophony that underscored the moment's divisiveness. Trump, sensing his victory, leaned back with a satisfied smirk, his eyes sweeping the crowd as if claiming their allegiance. Kimmel, grasping for any lifeline, tried to salvage the wreckage. "Well, folks, that's why we love live TV," he said, his voice hollow, the forced chuckle failing to mask his defeat. The crowd's response was tepid, their attention still fixed on Trump, who radiated an unshakable confidence. The camera lingered on Kimmel's strained expression, capturing the moment his polished persona crumbled under Trump's relentless onslaught. The crew in the control booth scrambled, signaling for a commercial break to stem the bleeding, but the damage was done. As the show cut away, clips of the confrontation flooded the internet, igniting a firestorm of reactions. Social media platforms buzzed with memes of Trump's smirk and Kimmel's stunned silence, while news outlets churned out headlines, "Trump humiliates Kimmel in explosive TV clash." Pundits praised Trump's audacity, framing it as a masterclass in turning the tables, while Kimmel's fans scrambled to defend him, arguing he'd been ambushed. The unedited footage, shared relentlessly, racked up millions of views, each click cementing Trump's triumph. He never addressed the incident, moving on to his next appearance with the same brash assurance, his silence amplifying his dominance. The moment became a cultural lightning rod, proof that Trump could command any stage, leaving Kimmel's mockery in the dust. The audience, both in the studio and online, was left in awe, witnessing a showdown where one man's defiance rewrote the narrative, turning a late-night roast into a legend-defining victory.